A Hasidic story tells about a Jewish shepherd boy who was raised ignorant of Judaism, but knew he was Jewish. One day, he entered the synagogue on Yom Kippur, the Jewish Day of Atonement. All day, he sat extremely moved by the prayers, but could not participate because he did not know the prayers or the language of prayer even. Towards the end of the day, as the liturgy was coming to a close, wanting to contribute something, he took out his shepherd pipe and played a tune he used to gather the sheep. While the congregation was outraged, feeling he had desecrated the prayer service and perhaps ruined their whole Day of Atonement, the rabbi, a Hasidic master, told them that they were wrong, and that the shepherd's wordless prayer from the heart was not only acceptable to God, it was the key to making their own prayers acceptable to God. While the band Dveyekus makes no explicit reference to this story as an inspiration in any materials I have seen, their music is clearly working in a similar sensibility, and it's a famous story, I'm sure they're familiar with it. The name of the band Dveyekus refers to an important Hasidic concept, but before getting into this, a few words about Hasidus. Hasidus is a form of Judaism that traces its origins to the teachings of Rabbi Israel ben Eliezer, known as the Baal Shem Tov, who flourished in the late 18th century in what was then the Kingdom of Poland, and now Ukraine. As it grew and spread, Hasidus organized itself into circles, or courts, around the teachings and examples of various charismatic figures. As these courts coalesced into recognizable streams, the various types of Hasidus were named usually after the location where they were centered. So, Gur Hasidim from Poland, Munkash from Hungary, and so on. Currently, one of the largest group of Hasidim are the Lubavitcher Hasidim, called Lubavitch after the town where leaders of the movement lived in the 19th century. All Hasidic groups are influenced by Lurianic Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism more broadly. Further, music and singing play a role in Hasidus from its very beginnings. For example, another important figure, the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Nachman of Breslav, composed many songs for Hasidim to sing and has a well-known poem encouraging disciples to listen to, quote, the songs of the weeds and, quote, the songs of the shepherds as they reveal the hidden songs of the heart. In this context, the practice of singing wordless tunes arises in most, if not all, Hasidic circles. These wordless tunes are called nigunim. With all this in mind, let's now return to Dveyekus. This word, which in Hebrew means to cleave, develops a particular importance in Hasidus. As the Baal Shem Tov puts it, one should continuously strive to connect and cleave to God. And this cleaving is the Dveyekus, it means to stick. The founder of the Lubavitch Hasidut states, Dveyekus is brought about by adhering to the laws of Orthodox Judaism and by living all aspects of one's life with a proper intention. Intention is often activated by the expression of two essential emotional states, joy and enthusiasm. For Lubavitcher Hasidim and Hasidim in general, nigunim play a key role in bringing about the emotional states of joy and enthusiasm, and to fostering intention, a certain kind of mental space. Here's an example of a nigun. And I should say that that excerpt is from a 6-minute longer part of that specific nigun, but those gentlemen sat together and sang nigunim for 40 minutes of all various stages and so on. This is the Hasidic musical practice and the philosophy behind it that is being brought into play by naming the band Dveyekus. So there's a lot kind of embodied in that word itself. Further, the wordless tunes on the band's solo album, A Pillar Without Mercy, are reworked Hasidic nigunim. As Dan Blacksburg, the band's founder and leader, explains in an interview, he chose nigunim that are on the meditative end of spectrum. What I did was take some of my favorite pieces and recompose, deconstruct them, so that they came out even slower and more doomy than I thought they were originally. And I'll come back to nigunim later in my presentation. The connection to mysticism that is foundational for Hasidus is reinforced in A Pillar Without Mercy through the track names and the album title. For example, track number 3 is called The Vision of the Chariot, and this refers to a central image in Jewish mysticism based on a vision of the prophet Isaiah of God seated on a heavenly chariot. Also, one central concept of Kabbalah is called in Hebrew tzimtzum, contraction. The infinite divine contracted itself to create room for everything that is not it. This idea is reflected in the second track title, Contraction of Infinite Light. Likewise, the last 2 tracks, called The 4 Worlds of Creation, Part 1 and Part 2, refer to this process. After the infinite divine contracted itself, it created everything else in a series of emanations, which according to Kabbalah took place in 4 stages, often referred to as worlds. So the 4 worlds of creations is a reflection of those 4 stages. I should say that some of the other references in their material seem more loosely Kabbalistic or are recognizably Kabbalistic, but not in a way that you can pinpoint as an exact reference. So there's a lot of discussion of pillars and the imagery and ideas related to pillars in Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism. And of course, well, I shouldn't say of course, maybe it's not obvious, but mercy is a big part of Jewish mysticism. But the specific combination, the album title, A Pillar Without Mercy, seems to be a creation of the band and not something that is a Kabbalistic concept exactly. So far, I focused on the Jewish part of Dveyekus' project. Now to the metal part. Let's listen to a short sample of their music as we transition. And let me just quickly say, since we're located where we're located, that those of you with even a little bit of a musical ear can hear the influences of Eastern European musicality in both the nigunim and in what Dveyekus is doing. And that's a whole separate, really interesting conversation to have about the Eastern European cultural overlaps of Hasidut and how that comes out into Hasidic, modern Hasidic music and how that relates to metal, but I'm not going to go there. While the sound of Dveyekus might seem closer to doom than drone, the band has been connected to drone as well. This is in part, I argue, coming from Dan Blacksburg himself, who in interviews cited paradigmatic drone bands such as Sun and Earth as influences, saying about his use of trombone for a metal band, I heard a lot of trombone the last time I saw Earth, and it's all over Sun's record, Monoliths and Dimensions. As part of his in-depth study of drone in his book Mysticism, Ritual, and Religion in Drone Metal, Owen Coggins, which Marcus, I don't see you over there, talked about already. Owen Coggins traces the formation of drone as a distinct subgenre. He shows how musicians, fans, and critics marked its contours through discursive practices that create affiliations between bands and works, such as talking about this band is influenced by that band, or this record is influenced by that record. Also, tagging music. So either in online databases, marking it as drone or drone metal or stuff like that, that identified to other people the contours of the subgenre. And I argue that unconsciously, this is what Dan Blacksburg begins this process by talking about sun and earth, and that then becomes replicated in how the band is received more publicly. So we see online that websites that review their album make these connections to drone. You can see up there, the top one, you can see drone, and as well as the references to sun and earth in the review. Here you can see, in talking about the genre, in including jazz rock and jazz fusion, drone metal and drone, and you can see over there again, drone doom metal, right? So it replicates itself, this connection. The reason I'm spending some time on the connection Dveyekus has to drone is because, while obviously metal as a whole has various ties to religion, as this conference amply demonstrates, drone has developed a particular connection to mystical religious traditions of various kinds. And again, Marcus has already prepared some of my work for me. As Kogan says, throughout the evolution of the drone metal subgenre, sonic, verbal, and visual references have frequently been made to mystical traditions, esoteric religious language, and spiritual practices, forming another generic convention that ties together bands and recordings. This is probably the strongest generic convention that ties Dveyekus to drone, and itself becomes a circular reinforcing component. What I mean by that is that when Dan talks about his connection to these drone bands, to sun and earth, he doesn't talk about mysticism. He talks about the musical aspect, the trombone. Fans of drone, people who are in the scene, recognize the mystical connection and kind of complete that circle without him having to say it. Now, interestingly, one review I found does use the word drone to describe the sonic aspect of at least one of the songs of Dveyekus. So if you see in the middle sentence, moments of complexity flirt with the ear, building a deceptive drone. So they're the reviewer, and this is from a website that does metal and other music. It's not just a metal website. So they're trying to make a statement about the sound of Dveyekus and not just about its connection, kind of more broadly, or more, I'm missing the word. I find this example interesting because it seems to make the connection between the perceived sound of drone, in this one track at least, and the mystical content of the music by talking about the Zen aspect. So it's not talking about necessarily Jewish mysticism, but it's conveying something about the quality of the sound as an experience. And again, going back to Coggins, he shows that the connection between drone and mysticism extends to the way fans talk about their experiences with the music. So not just the bands are engaging with mystical themes, fans say that they have some sort of mystical experience when they engage with drone. He says, the fans have developed a specific set of terms for talking about their experiences of drone, and that many of these terms and references are ambivalently related to religion. Such terminology tends to be used in ways which are separated from established institutional meanings and practices, instead pointing at ideas of religiosity in which mysterious ambiguity is determinedly retained. Let me just pause for a moment and say, that one thing that happened to me as I was writing this paper is that I realized that the real interesting thing I had to say about it, I wasn't there yet. That I was writing the paper and I was realizing, oh, there's something beyond. And for example, this quotation, this quotation points to something deeper that I'm not going to quite get at yet. Further, he shows when fans of drone talk about their experience of it, they use what he terms ineffability and estrangement from language. That is, reports about listening to drone metal, whether or not elicited by the researcher, frequently begin with such denials of the possibility of description. So when fans of drone talk about their experiences, they usually begin by saying, well, I can't really tell you what it's like. And he has a number of examples that he lists in his book. For listeners of drone, their sense of their own experience is one that goes beyond the capability of human language to express. He explains that this phenomenon arises from the physical experience of loudness that one experiences at live shows of many paradigmatic drone bands. A quality that may not apply to Dveyekus, but again, through this kind of osmosis of the subgenre, even if their music doesn't hit to create that drone experience, it is understood to fall under what one might think of when they think of Om or something like that. But it goes farther than that, because the mystical musical tradition that they are working with, the Hasidic nigunim, are also associated with ineffability. One of the starting points of Kabbalah is the denial of the possibility of human language to describe the infinite divine. As one Kabbalistic text puts it, no letter, vowel, or image can be applied to the infinite divine, whom we cannot depict, of whom we cannot speak. For the Kabbalists, the true divinity is beyond the scope of our reality and beyond the capability of our minds to understand and our language to describe. I cannot fully develop in this paper all the various ways that the ineffability of the infinite divine influences Kabbalah and Hasidus. But I will say that it plays a role in the idea of the nigun, wordless tunes that go beyond language to achieve Dveyekus, cleaving with the divine. This is the idea at the heart of the Hasidic tale with which I began my presentation. The shepherd boy, who does not know the language of prayer, expresses through his music something so pure about his desire for God that the Hasidic master sees it as being higher than the prayer of words. This idea is also expressed by the title of the first track of A Pillar Without Mercy, Wordless Ecstasy, a name that alludes to the emotional state that is the goal of a nigun, as one contemporary Chassid says about the lack of words in these tunes. Words become superfluous, unnecessary, and even a hindrance to the great rush of emotions being experienced. This is the elevation reached with a wordless Hasidic melody, a nigun. So, both drone metal and Hasidic nigunim are understood as expressions of a kind of ineffable mystical experience, or as methods of creating such an experience. And Dveyekus combines them in their music. It is fitting then that except of the bare minimum of textual references, band name, album, and track titles, language is completely absent from Dveyekus. Their songs do not have lyrics, just like nigunim do not have lyrics. They are focused on reaching and conveying the ineffable that is central both to Hasidic nigunim and drone. Thank you.